After the Revolutionary War, the newly independent United States faced a terrifying problem. They had fought a brutal conflict to escape a king, but winning left them with a massive power vacuum and a blank slate. They needed a central leader, but they were deeply afraid of accidentally crowning another dictator. The framers had to thread an incredibly tight needle. The executive branch required enough authority to actively govern a sprawling new country, but it needed strict restraints to prevent tyranny. George Washington stepped into this role with zero historical precedent. Every single decision he made set a standard. By willingly stepping down after 2 terms and ensuring a peaceful transfer of power, he proved the office belonged to the people, not the person holding it. This document is the Declaration of Independence. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson helped draft it, successfully translating the high ideals of the independence movement into the functional laws and paperwork required to run a government. This map shows the Louisiana Purchase highlighted in red. During his presidency, Jefferson immediately tested the boundaries of his newly drafted constitutional power by authorizing this massive land buy, physically doubling the size of the United States overnight. Over just a few decades, these initial leaders took a theoretical democratic experiment and hammered it out into a working, expanding government blueprint. As the country looked west, the presidency adapted to a mandate of aggressive expansion. Andrew Jackson rode a wave of populist appeal to become the people's president, but he wielded that power ruthlessly, ordering the forced removal of Native Americans to clear land for newly drawn borders. James K. Polk pushed even further, aggressively annexing Texas, Oregon, and much of the Southwest. He achieved his territorial goals in a single term, but bringing those vast new lands into the Union sparked violent debates over whether slavery would expand alongside them. The men who followed could not manage the boiling conflict. Leaders like Franklin Pierce and James Buchanan watched the tension fracture the country and failed to stop Southern states from ultimately seceding. This photograph captures the grim reality of a fractured nation at war. To save the Union from total collapse, Abraham Lincoln stretched the limits of his office, utilizing emergency war powers and issuing the Emancipation Proclamation to cripple the Confederate economy and begin the process of ending slavery. The relentless drive to expand American borders broke the country in two, forcing the presidency to test the absolute limits of its own authority just to ensure the nation survived. The post-war years brought chaos to the executive branch. Andrew Johnson faced intense clashes with Congress that led to his impeachment. Ulysses S. Grant's administration was plagued by widespread corruption, and James A. Garfield's assassination forced the government to completely overhaul how it hired federal employees. As the nation rapidly industrialized, the presidency had to adapt to corporate power. Theodore Roosevelt began breaking up monopolies and championing massive, scale-defying infrastructure projects, like the concrete locks you see here building the Panama Canal. But the 20th century introduced entirely new existential threats. When the global economy completely collapsed, Herbert Hoover was unable to stop the bleeding, leaving millions waiting in long lines for relief in the shadows of American cities. Franklin D. Roosevelt responded by vastly expanding the reach of the executive branch. His New Deal programs intervened directly in the economy, and his leadership through World War II was so critical he was elected to 4 terms, breaking George Washington's original standard. Harry Truman then ordered the deployment of atomic weapons to end the war, instantly wiping out 2 cities. The sheer scale of that destructive capability gave the executive branch a permanent, civilization-ending power. The crushing pressures of industrialization and 2 world wars took an office designed to administer domestic laws and turned it into the definitive leader of a global superpower. The modern presidency quickly became highly visible and heavily involved in domestic civil rights. Here you see armed federal troops deployed by Dwight D. Eisenhower to enforce desegregation in Little Rock, Arkansas. Lyndon B. Johnson continued that momentum, signing into law landmark civil rights legislation while surrounded by activists and lawmakers. However, LBJ's domestic achievements were heavily overshadowed by the grim reality of the Vietnam War dragging on, trapping soldiers in the jungle and deeply dividing the country at home. The public's trust in the institution took another severe hit when Richard Nixon's involvement in the Watergate scandal led to the first presidential resignation in American history. The office eventually pivoted towards conservative economics and assertive diplomacy under Ronald Reagan, who famously stood at the Berlin Wall to challenge Soviet influence during the Cold War. Into the 21st century, the presidency has navigated a complex maze of global terrorism, historic milestones like the election of Barack Obama, and intense political polarization marked by Donald Trump's deeply divided years in office. Today, the person sitting in the Oval Office has to manage instantaneous global crises while attempting to lead a rapidly shifting, heavily divided domestic culture. The modern presidency is vastly different from the office designed in 1787. It is a composite entity, built layer by layer over 45 administrations. Polk expanded the physical map, Lincoln forged moral authority, and FDR built its massive institutional size. Yet today, the office remains entirely unpredictable. Only Grover Cleveland and Donald Trump managed to step away and then successfully return to power for non-consecutive terms, proving the electorate can always rewrite the script. Decisions made by a single executive ripple forward, shaping laws, borders, and civil rights for generations. The history of the presidents is exactly how the American story evolved. Which of these leaders do you think left the most significant impact on the world today? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more history.